How did one of Nairobi's coldest billionaires end up marrying a poor fruit seller from the side of the road? He lived behind luxury, power, and glass walls. She lived under the burning sun, fighting every day just to survive. Their worlds were never supposed to meet. But one unexpected moment changed everything. And what followed became a story of love, sacrifice, and destiny that left an entire city speechless. How could one of Nairobi's coldest billionaires end up marrying a woman who sold fruit on a dusty roadside? He lived behind glass walls, tinted cars, and doors that opened before he touched them. She lived under the sun, beside a wooden cart, counting every coin before sunset. He was known for buying buildings. She was known for slicing mangoes with careful hands and smiling through hunger. No one in the city could have imagined that their lives would collide. And when they did, the story that followed left an entire community speechless. So sit back, relax, and let this powerful story unfold. In the heart of Nairobi, where traffic never truly slept and ambition moved faster than the wind, Damian Karanja sat in the back seat of a black luxury SUV, staring out of the window without really seeing anything. At 38, Damian was already one of the most feared and admired businessmen in Kenya. He owned logistics companies, shopping complexes, and a chain of private medical centers. Newspapers called him brilliant. Business magazines called him disciplined. His rivals called him dangerous. But the people who worked close to him used a different word: cold. Damian rarely smiled. He never wasted words. He believed emotions blurred judgment, and he had spent years building a life where feelings had no place. His late father had taught him one thing before he died: the world respects strength, not softness. And Damian had obeyed that lesson so well that even success had started to feel silent. That morning, his driver slowed near a crowded roadside market just outside the city center. The road ahead was blocked. Street vendors were shouting. A few uniformed city officers were moving from stall to stall, dragging away tables, baskets, and umbrellas. Some vendors pleaded. Some cried. Others stood frozen, as if they were watching their entire lives being lifted into a truck. Damian barely looked up at first. He was late for a board meeting. But then he heard a voice. It was not the loudest voice there. It was simply the kind that carried pain. "Please, just give me one more day. Please, I already paid half." Something in the way those words were spoken made him glance up. There, between overturned crates of oranges and dust swirling in the afternoon heat, stood a young woman beside a fruit cart. She wore a faded blue dress and flat sandals that had clearly seen too many seasons. Her hair was wrapped in a simple scarf. Her hands were trembling, but she was still trying to keep her dignity as two officers grabbed the edge of her cart. On the cart were neatly arranged mangoes, bananas, pineapples, and avocados. Not much, but enough to tell Damian that somebody had built that display with care. The woman stepped forward again. "Please," she said, softer this time. "My brother is sick. If you take everything today, I will have nothing." One officer laughed without humor. "Then you should have paid on time." He pushed the cart hard. It tipped. Fruit rolled into the road. Mangoes burst on the pavement. A pineapple cracked near the tire of Damian's car. The woman dropped to her knees instantly, trying to gather what she could before cars crushed it. And then something unexpected happened. A small boy, no older than 12, came running from the side of the road. He was thin, too thin. He tried to help her, but after only a few steps, he stumbled badly. Then he collapsed. The woman screamed, "Jonah!" Damian's body moved before his mind had fully decided. He opened the SUV door and stepped out. His driver looked stunned. The officers stopped talking. For a moment, the entire roadside seemed to pause. Damian walked straight toward the boy lying on the ground. The child's eyes were half open, but his breathing was weak. Sweat covered his face. His lips looked dry. The woman rushed beside him and tried to lift the boy, but she was shaking too much. "Please," she whispered, looking up at Damian with desperation she could no longer hide. "Please help me." Damian turned to his driver. "Open the car." Within seconds, the boy was in the back seat. The woman hesitated before entering, glancing once at her ruined cart, her scattered fruit, and the officers who had already started looking away from her pain as though it no longer mattered. Damian noticed. "To the hospital," he said. Then he looked at her. "Come." The drive to the hospital was quiet, except for the sound of the boy's weak breathing and the woman whispering prayers under her breath. Damian sat across from them, watching. The woman held the boy's hand with both of hers. Even in panic, she kept wiping the dust from his face. At one point, the boy tried to speak. "I'm sorry, Nia." She forced a smile so he would not see her fear. "Do not talk, Jonah. Just breathe. We are almost there." Nia. So that was her name. At Karanja Life Medical Center, one of Damian's own hospitals, doctors rushed Jonah inside. The woman tried to follow, but a nurse stopped her at the doors. "Please wait." Nia stood there frozen, staring through the glass as the staff moved around her brother. Damian walked to the reception desk, made one brief call, and everything changed. Senior doctors appeared. Tests began immediately. No one asked for payment. No one delayed. Nia noticed. She turned slowly to Damian. "You own this place?" "Yes." For a second, she looked embarrassed, as if she had unknowingly climbed into the car of a man from another planet. Then she lowered her eyes. "Thank you." It was a simple sentence. No performance, no flattery, just truth. An hour later, the doctor returned with results. Jonah had a serious heart condition that had been getting worse for months. He needed surgery. It was treatable, but not if they waited much longer. Nia listened in silence. When the doctor finished, she asked the question she was afraid to ask. "How much?" The doctor looked at Damian first, then back at her. "It is expensive." That was all he said, but Nia understood. Her face changed, not dramatically, not like someone in a film. It changed in the quiet way real people change when hope becomes heavier than fear. She thanked the doctor, sat down, and stared at the floor. Damian remained standing nearby. After a long silence, he asked, "Where are your parents?" Nia swallowed. "They are gone." "And the boy?" "My brother. You take care of him alone?" She nodded. Then, perhaps because she was too exhausted to protect her pride, she finally told him the truth. She and Jonah had lived alone for 3 years. After their mother died, Nia left college and started selling fruit at the roadside market. Every day she woke before sunrise, bought produce wholesale, arranged it beautifully, and sold until dark. Some days were good, some days were a waste, but she survived. Except now, surviving was no longer enough. Jonah needed surgery, and the little money she had saved had already gone into medicine, rent, and school fees. Damian listened, expression unreadable. Then his phone rang. It was his lawyer. He almost ignored it, but answered when he saw the caller's name. The conversation was brief, but it tightened something in his face. When he hung up, Nia noticed the shift in him. "Bad news?" she asked before she could stop herself. Damian gave the smallest smile. It was surprising because it looked like a forgotten habit. Something like that. He did not explain, but the truth was this. That very morning, Damian had learned that his late grandmother's final legal trust was about to be activated. His grandmother, Mama Salome Karanja, had built the hospital foundation that carried the family name. In her will, she left controlling authority of the charity hospitals and scholarship network to Damian, but under one condition. Within 30 days, he had to prove that he was building a life anchored in family, compassion, and community. If he failed, control would pass to his cousin, Victor Karanja. Victor was charming in public and greedy in private. Damian knew exactly what Victor would do. Sell off the community hospitals, cut the scholarship program, turn charity land into luxury property. Damian had fought too hard to let that happen. But there was one clause he had not expected. He needed a lawful spouse before the final transfer hearing. Not because his grandmother worshipped marriage, but because she did not trust a man who lived only for numbers. At the time, Damian had called the clause ridiculous. Now, standing in a hospital hallway beside a roadside fruit seller whose brother needed life-saving surgery, he felt something strange. Not a plan, not yet, just a door quietly opening. The next morning, Damian returned to the roadside market. Nia was there. Her cart was smaller now. Half her fruit was gone. One side of the wheel had been repaired with rope. She looked tired, but she was working. When she saw Damian, she straightened. "How is Jonah?" he asked. "He is stable." "And the surgery?" Nia gave a sad smile. "They gave me time to decide. Time is cheaper than money." Damian looked at the cart, the flies circling the cut fruit, the cracked shade above her head, the way customers passed without knowing they were walking past a woman holding her whole life together with stubbornness. Then he said something that made her stare at him as if she had misheard. "I want to make you an offer." Nia folded her arms carefully. "What kind of offer?" "A marriage." She blinked. Then she laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was impossible. "I do not know what rich men joke about, Mr. Karanja, but I'm not joking." That silenced her. Damian spoke plainly. That was his way. He explained the will. He explained the deadline. He explained that he needed a wife for the legal transfer process, and she needed money for Jonah's surgery and a stable future. It would be a formal arrangement, he said. You would not lose your dignity. You would have your own room, your own legal protection, and your brother's full treatment would be covered. In return, you would attend official events with me until the trust transfer is complete. Nia stared at him as though the world had become unrecognizable. You want to marry a woman who sells fruit by the road? Yes. Why me? Damian paused. Because you looked at your brother before you looked at your ruined business. Because you said thank you when your life was falling apart. Because in a city full of polished faces, yours was honest. But that was not the language Damian usually used. So he simply said, because I trust what I saw. Nia shook her head and stepped back. No. He was not surprised. I understand. But before he turned to leave, She asked one more thing.
If I say yes, what happens after?
When the transfer is complete, you can choose. Stay married if you want. Leave if you want. I will still keep my word to help your brother and secure your business future. Nia looked away. A luxury car passed behind him. Somewhere nearby, a vendor shouted prices. Life kept moving, yet she felt as if time had narrowed into one impossible choice.
I need to think.
Damian nodded once. You have 2 days. That night, Nia sat beside Jonah's hospital bed. He was asleep. The machines around him beeped softly. She looked at his thin face and remembered every promise she had ever made him. That she would keep him safe. That she would help him finish school. That she would never let him feel alone. But promises are easy when they do not cost everything. By morning, the landlord had come demanding overdue rent. By afternoon, a supplier refused more produce on credit. And before sunset, Nia got a call from the hospital administrator reminding her that Jonah's surgery schedule could not be held forever. She stood outside, holding the phone, eyes full of tears she refused to let fall. Then, Damian's business card felt heavy in her hand. The next day, she called. The civil wedding happened quietly. No orchestra, no grand crowd. Only 2 witnesses, a lawyer, and a woman who felt as though she had stepped out of her own life and into someone else's. Nia wore a simple cream dress Damian's assistant had arranged for her. Damian wore a dark suit and the same unreadable expression he always seemed to carry. But when the registrar asked if he accepted Nia Achieng as his lawful wife, his answer was immediate. Yes. When Nia answered, her voice trembled. Yes. And just like that, the billionaire and the fruit seller became husband and wife. The newspapers exploded by evening. Mystery woman marries billionaire tycoon. Who is Nia Achieng? From the street to the mansion. Social media turned her into a topic, a rumor, a target, and an object of fascination overnight. Some called her lucky. Some called her shameless. Some said she must have trapped him. None of them knew the truth. Damian brought Nia and Jonah into his estate the same day. Jonah was moved into a recovery suite connected to his private medical team. Nia walked through the mansion in disbelief. The floors gleamed. The windows stretched high. The silence felt expensive. And yet, despite all the beauty, the place felt empty. A house this large should have sounded alive. Instead, it sounded careful, controlled, like Damian himself. At dinner that first night, Nia barely touched her food. Damian noticed. You can ask questions, he said. She looked up. Do you always talk like a contract? For the first time, he almost smiled. Usually. That small moment softened the room. Nia asked about the rules. Damian answered honestly. There would be public events, media appearances, family introductions, and discretion. In return, Jonah's surgery would happen in 3 days. Her rent debt would be cleared, and a legal fund would be established in her name after the trust hearing so she could rebuild her business properly. Nia listened. Then, she asked a question Damian did not expect. Why does this house feel sad? He did not answer immediately. Because the people he loved were gone. Because he had filled rooms with objects instead of voices. Because grief had turned into discipline, and discipline had turned into distance. Instead, he only said, I got used to being alone. Nia looked at him with quiet understanding. Sometimes the simplest truths are the hardest to hide from. Jonah's surgery was successful. For the first time in months, Nia cried with relief instead of fear. She hugged the surgeon. Then she turned to Damian. Words failed her, so she held his hands. Only for a moment, but that brief human touch unsettled him more than any business crisis ever had. Days passed, then weeks. Nia slowly learned the rhythms of Damian's world, how to stand before cameras, how to survive charity dinners where people smiled with their mouths and measured with their eyes, how to sit across from women wearing diamonds who still somehow looked at her as if she were the least polished thing in the room. At first, she wanted to disappear. But Nia had spent too many years surviving embarrassment to be broken by it. She listened, she learned, she adapted. And something else happened. The staff began to love her. She learned the names of the cooks, the guards, the gardeners, and the cleaners. She greeted everyone. She carried tea to Jonah herself instead of calling for help. When one of the kitchen workers fell ill, Nia visited her in the staff quarters with soup and medicine. Small things. But houses remember small things. So do people. Soon, the mansion no longer felt quite as cold. Damian noticed that too. One evening, he came home late from a brutal board session and found music playing softly from the kitchen. Nia was standing there in a simple house dress, teaching Jonah how to slice fruit into neat patterns for a platter. They were laughing, actually laughing. The kind of laughter that does not ask permission before filling a room. Damian stood in the doorway longer than necessary. Jonah saw him first. "Brother Damian," the boy said with excitement. Nia turned and laughed. "Now you have promoted him?" Jonah grinned. "He saved my life. He deserves promotion." Damian should have corrected him. Instead, he walked in and sat down. For the first time in years, he ate fruit in his own kitchen while listening to someone talk about ordinary things. Mango prices, school jokes, how Jonah hated hospital food, how one customer once tried to bargain for half an avocado. Simple things. Yet Damian found himself staying, not because he had to, because he wanted to. Outside the house, trouble was growing. Victor Karanja had not taken the marriage well. He smiled for cameras and congratulated the couple publicly, but privately he was furious. He began digging into Nia's background. He paid bloggers to mock her. He leaked old photos of her roadside stall as if poverty itself were a scandal. He whispered to board members that Damian's marriage was a desperate trick. And perhaps worst of all, he underestimated Nia. One Saturday, Damian took Nia to visit one of the foundation's community clinics in Eastlands. The visit was supposed to be symbolic. A few photos, a few speeches, then home. But Nia did something unexpected. Instead of simply smiling for cameras, she walked through the waiting area and began speaking to women there. Mothers with sick babies, elderly men waiting too long, street vendors afraid of treatment costs. By the time she returned, she had gathered more truth in 20 minutes than most executives learned in a year. That night she told Damian, "Your clinics help people, but many women still avoid them until they are very sick. Why? They lose a day of income if they leave work. Some cannot even afford transport. Some are scared of the shame of needing help." Damian listened. And if you really want your grandmother's legacy to live, do not just build bigger hospitals. Build access. That sentence stayed with him. Over the next week, Damian asked Nia to review outreach plans with the foundation team. At first, the executives were offended. What could a former fruit seller possibly teach them? By the second meeting, None of them were laughing. Nia understood markets, crowds, mothers, hunger, pride, fear. She knew what made poor people delay help. She knew how far people walked to avoid embarrassment. She knew that dignity was not a luxury. It was a doorway. Her ideas were practical and powerful. Mobile clinic days inside open markets, health booths near transport stations, nutrition cards for children, a small vendor emergency fund. Damian watched his executives slowly realize that the woman they had dismissed could see what they could not. Respect began changing shape around her. And with every passing day, something in Damian changed too. He started coming home earlier. He started asking Jonah about school. He started listening when Nia spoke, not out of obligation, but because her voice had become one of the few things that quieted his mind. One evening, during a heavy rain, the city lights blurred beyond the windows. Nia stood on the balcony watching the storm. Damian joined her. For a while they said nothing. Then she asked, "Were you always like this?" "Like what?" "Closed." He exhaled slowly. "No." He told her then about his mother dying when he was young, about his father turning pain into hardness, about learning to win before he learned to heal, about success becoming a wall he no longer knew how to step out from behind. Nia listened without interrupting. When he finished, she said quietly, "You built a safe life. But safe is not the same as full." Damian looked at her. It was a simple sentence, yet it felt like someone had placed a mirror in front of him. As Jonah regained strength, Nia began dreaming again. Real dreaming. Not just surviving. One day, Damian found her sketching ideas in a notebook. "What is that?" he asked. She hesitated. "It is silly." "Show me." She passed him the notebook. Inside were ideas for a fruit and fresh juice cooperative run by market women. Not charity. Business. A place where women like her could buy wholesale together, store produce safely, reduce waste, and sell clean packaged fruit to offices and schools. Damian looked through page after page of surprisingly sharp detail. Margins, packaging ideas, morning routes, storage costs, even branding colors. "You thought this through." Nia gave a shy smile. "At the roadside, you have many quiet hours to think about the life you wish you had." Damian closed the notebook gently. "It is not silly." That same week, he quietly assigned a business team to study the model. Nia did not know. He wanted to see whether her dream could stand in the real world. It could. And more than that, it could thrive. But before he could tell her, Victor made his move. An anonymous story hit several gossip blogs. It claimed Damian's marriage was fake, that Nia had been paid, that the union was only a legal trick to secure the trust. The story spread fast. Phones rang across the estate. Board members demanded explanations. Reporters circled like vultures. Nia pretended to be strong, but inside she felt something crumbling. That night, as she walked past Damian's study, she heard his voice through a half-open door. "I only need stability until the transfer is complete," he said to his lawyer. "After that, I'll decide the next step." The words hit her like cold water. He had said nothing technically wrong, but pain does not always listen to context. To Nia, it sounded like proof. Proof that she was still part of an arrangement before she was part of a life. The next morning she was distant. Damian noticed immediately. "What happened?" "Nothing." "That is not true." She turned to him with wounded calm. "When the transfer is complete, you will decide the next step." Is that correct? Damian realized instantly what she had heard. Nia. It is fine, she said. This started as an arrangement. I did not forget. But the truth was, she had forgotten. Or perhaps she had hoped. And hope is dangerous when it grows where it was never invited. The final trust gala arrived 2 weeks later. It was held in a grand ballroom filled with politicians, board members, investors, journalists, and old family friends. Everything glittered. Everything smiled. Everything was tense. Nia wore a deep emerald gown that made her look elegant without erasing who she was. Damian saw her descend the staircase and could not look away. He had seen beauty before, but not this kind. Not the kind shaped by resilience. Not the kind that still carried truth in its eyes. All evening, cameras followed them. Victor moved through the crowd like a man who had already prepared the fire and was simply waiting for the right moment to strike the match. When the chairman finally stepped up to announce the formal transfer of the foundation authority, Victor interrupted. He took the microphone. There was a murmur across the hall. He smiled the polished smile of a man who enjoys hurting people in public. Before we celebrate legacy, he said, perhaps we should first celebrate honesty. Damian's expression hardened. Victor continued. It would be unfortunate if this entire board transferred power based on a marriage that exists only on paper. Gasps spread through the room. Nia felt the blood drain from her face. Victor signaled to a screen behind him. Documents appeared. Photographs. Legal timelines. Even the date of Jonah's hospital admission. This was never love, Victor said. This was strategy. The crowd erupted into whispers. Every camera turned toward Nia. Humiliation burned through her. She looked at Damian, but the pain in her chest was already too loud. Without a word, she stepped back and turned to leave. Damian's voice cut through the room. Nia, wait. She stopped, but did not turn. Then Damian did something no one expected. He walked to the stage, took the microphone from Victor's hand, and faced the entire room. His voice was calm, clear, unshaking. Yes, he said. This marriage began as an arrangement. The whispering grew louder. He did not flinch. It began because I believed I could fulfill a legal condition and save a foundation at the same time. Nia closed her eyes. But then his next words changed everything. What I did not expect was that the woman I married would expose how small my world had become. The room went silent. Damian looked toward Nia. For years I built companies, acquired land, won battles, and told myself that was strength. Then Nia Achieng walked into my life carrying more courage in one tired afternoon than I had shown in years. No one moved. He continued. She taught me that dignity matters more than image, that service without understanding is pride dressed as generosity, that a hospital means nothing if the people who need it are too ashamed or too poor to reach it. Victor tried to interrupt, but Damian raised one hand. And since we are discussing honesty, let us discuss yours. He nodded to his legal director. A new file appeared on the screen. Transfer records, shell payments, unauthorized property evaluations. Victor's smile vanished. Damian's voice turned harder. While I was accused of using marriage to protect a public trust, Victor Karanja was preparing to strip that same trust for private profit. The ballroom exploded. Board members stood. Journalists rushed forward. Victor shouted that it was a lie, but the documents were already speaking for themselves. Damian stepped down from the stage and walked toward Nia. His voice softened. "I cannot change how this began, but I can tell the truth about what it became." Now she turned to face him. In front of everyone, Damian said the words he had never imagined himself speaking in public. "I love you, Nia." Tears filled her eyes, not because the room was watching, because his voice carried no performance now, only surrender. "I love the way you fight without becoming bitter. I love the way you care for people without asking whether they can repay you. I love the way this house became a home because you walked into it. And if you choose to leave me after tonight, I will still spend the rest of my life grateful that you changed me." Silence held the room. Then Damian reached into his jacket and handed her a folder. Nia opened it with shaking hands. Inside were the legal papers for a new business, Nia Fresh Cooperative, registered in her name, with vendor shares protected by trust law. Also included were architectural drawings, a clean produce center, cold storage rooms, a juice processing line, a childcare corner for market mothers, and beside it, another document, a funding order for mobile health outreach units serving open-air markets across Nairobi. Nia looked up, unable to speak. Damian said quietly, "You gave me a better vision for my grandmother's legacy. So I built it with your name where the door begins." By now, many guests were openly emotional. Even the staff near the walls had tears in their eyes. Nia covered her mouth. Then, through tears and disbelief, she smiled. It was the kind of smile that comes only when pain has traveled a long road and finally sees hope standing at the end of it. She stepped closer. "Are you still asking as part of an arrangement?" Damian shook his head. "No. I am asking as a man who does not want to go back to the life he had before you." Nia nodded slowly. Then she answered, "Then yes. This time, yes." The room burst into applause. Not the polite kind, the real kind. The kind that rises when people witness something bigger than status, something true. Victor was removed from the board investigation that same night. Within weeks, the foundation was restructured under stricter oversight. The mobile market clinics launched exactly 3 months later. Women who once delayed treatment began receiving care where they worked. Children were screened earlier. Expectant mothers got nutritional support. And for the first time, many vendors felt seen instead of judged. Nia Fresh Cooperative opened on a bright morning under a wide Nairobi sky. The women who had once sold alone now bought stock together. Waste dropped. Profits rose. Uniform packaging carried the cooperative name into office towers and schools. The little roadside fruit seller who had once begged officers not to destroy her cart now stood before a growing business that changed other women's lives. Jonah, stronger and healthier, returned to school with a smile that no longer looked tired. He often told people that his sister did not just sell fruit. She sold hope, one piece at a time. As for Damian, people still respected him. But now they understood him differently. He was still sharp in business, still disciplined, still powerful. But he was no longer cold. The man who once measured life in contracts had learned that the best things cannot be negotiated. They can only be received, protected, and returned with gratitude. Months later, Damian and Nia held a second wedding. A real one. This time, there was music, family, laughter, color, community. Women danced with joyful energy. Clinic nurses came. Foundation staff came. Even the old market vendors came, carrying baskets of fruit so bright they looked like a blessing spread across the earth. When Nia walked toward Damian, she was not walking as a woman rescued by wealth. She was walking as a woman who had remained herself through every storm. And that was why he loved her. Not because she needed saving, but because even while surviving, she had carried the power to save what was dying inside him. Life did not become perfect after that. No real life does. There were still hard days, difficult decisions, painful headlines, and moments of misunderstanding. But the difference was this: they no longer faced life as strangers bound by paper. They faced it as partners. And sometimes, that changes everything. The city that once mocked Nia for coming from the roadside later celebrated her as a business leader. The same cameras that once searched her face for scandal now followed her work with respect. But the most meaningful moments for Nia were never the public ones. They were the quiet ones. Watching Jonah run without weakness. Seeing women count fuller earnings at the cooperative. Walking through the mansion and hearing it finally sound alive. And every now and then, she would remember the day her cart was overturned and fruit rolled into the road. Back then, it had felt like the end. She did not know it was the beginning. That is the strange mystery of life. Sometimes what breaks in front of you is not the destruction of your future. It is the doorway to it. And sometimes, the people we think live in opposite worlds are the very people meant to transform each other. A billionaire may know how to buy comfort, but it takes a woman of courage to teach him how to build a home. A poor fruit seller may have little money, but if she carries vision, integrity, and love, she may be richer than the world ever guessed. So never be too quick to judge a person by where you first meet them. The roadside is not always where a story ends. Sometimes it is where destiny waits. If this story touched your heart, tell me in the comments. Do you think Damian truly changed because of love, or because Nia showed him the truth about himself? And if you believe kindness can still transform lives, do not forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with someone who needs a little hope today. Until next time, stay blessed, stay inspired, and remember this: a humble heart can enter places that money alone never can.